Ethan Walker leaned back in his leather office chair, the San Francisco skyline stretching out behind him. His penthouse office, perched high above the bustling city, was a testament to his success as the founder and CEO of Walker Innovations, a tech company that had revolutionized the way people connected online. But at this moment, Ethan wasn't thinking about his latest project or the millions his company had just raised in funding. Instead, he was staring at his phone, where a message from an old high school friend, Jake Miller, glowed on the screen. "Come on, Ethan, you owe me for that calculus final senior year." Jake's voice crackled through the speaker when Ethan finally picked up. Ethan sighed, swiveling his chair to face the window. "That was over a decade ago, Jake. What do you want?" Jake chuckled, but there was a seriousness in his tone. "I need you to do something for me. The alumni ball is coming up, and I want you to invite Lila Harper as your date." Ethan frowned, the name tugging at a distant memory. Lila Harper. I barely remember her. "Exactly," Jake said, his voice growing sharper. "You barely noticed her, but you were part of the crowd that made her life miserable. We all were. And now, she's someone worth noticing. She's a top interior designer in New York, Ethan. She's made something of herself despite everything." Ethan rubbed his temples, already regretting answering the call. "Why me? Why don't you ask her yourself?" "Because she won't listen to me," Jake admitted. "I was one of the worst, but you were indifferent. And sometimes, indifference hurts more than cruelty. You owe her this, Ethan. We all do." The line went quiet for a moment, as Ethan considered Jake's words. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, I'll reach out. But if she says no, this is on you." "You," Jake said, relief evident in his voice. "Her contact info is on the Alumni website. And Ethan, thank you." After hanging up, Ethan stared at his phone for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, he opened his laptop and began typing an email to Lila Harper. Ethan stared at the blinking cursor on his screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He had already typed and deleted 3 drafts of the email. Each one felt either too formal or too forced. How exactly was he supposed to reach out to someone he barely remembered? Someone who probably had every reason to ignore him. Finally, he settled on something simple. Subject: Alumni Ball Invitation. "Hi, Lila. I hope this email finds you well. My name is Ethan Walker. We went to Westbridge High together, class of 2013. I know this might seem out of the blue, but I wanted to reach out about the upcoming alumni ball. Jake Miller suggested I contact you, and after looking into your incredible work as a designer, I thought it might be nice to attend the event together. I realize this might seem presumptuous, especially since we didn't really know each other in high school, but I genuinely like the chance to reconnect and hear your story. If this isn't something you're interested in, I completely understand. Either way, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Let's Fix Work. Best. Ethan?" He hit send before he could overthink it. Leaning back in his chair, Ethan exhaled deeply, already bracing himself for the inevitable rejection. The reply came faster than he expected. His phone buzzed with a notification just as he was stepping into a meeting. He glanced at the screen, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the sender. Lila Harper. Subject: Alumni Ball Invitation. "Hi, Ethan. I'll admit, I was surprised to see your name in my inbox. High school feels like a lifetime ago, and I've avoided most alumni events for obvious reasons. That said, I appreciate your honesty in reaching out. I'll agree to attend the ball with you, but I have one condition. I'll be wearing a masquerade mask the entire evening. No one sees my face until I decide it's time. If that's too strange for you, I completely understand. Best, Lila." Angelienne read the email twice, then a third time, trying to decipher the tone behind her words. Was she being playful, guarded, or was this her way of keeping him at arm's length? He quickly typed a response. "Hi, Lila. Thank you for replying so quickly. I think your idea is intriguing. Let's discuss it over coffee. Are you free this week? Best, Ethan. The next morning, Ethan found himself at a small cafe in downtown Manhattan, nervously checking his watch. He had flown in the night before, determined to meet Lila in person. At exactly 9 a.m., the door chimed, and she walked in. Lila Harper was nothing like he remembered. Gone was the shy, awkward girl who used to sit in the back of the classroom, trying to make herself invisible. In her place was a confident woman with sharp features, her dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She wore a tailored blazer and carried herself with an air of quiet authority. "Ethan Walker," she said, her voice calm but cool as she slid into the seat across from him. "I have to admit, I was curious to see if you'd actually show up." "I could say the same about you," Ethan replied, offering a small smile. The barista approached and Ethan gestured toward the menu. "What can I get you?" "Black coffee," Lila said without hesitation. "No sugar, no cream." Ethan ordered the same, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "So, about this mask idea." Lila raised an eyebrow. "You don't like it?" "Not that," Ethan said carefully. "I just want to understand why." Lila took a sip of her coffee, her gaze steady. "Because I want one night where people have to actually talk to me before they judge me. No whispers, no stares, just conversation." Ethan nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But people are going to be curious. They'll ask questions." "Let them," Lila said simply. "I'm not hiding, Ethan. I'm just controlling the narrative." He couldn't help but admire her resolve. "All right," he said. "If that's what you want, I'm in. But we should probably meet a few more times before the ball, so we don't look like complete strangers." Lila tilted her head, considering his suggestion. "You mean practice?" "Exactly," Ethan said. "Dinner, maybe? Somewhere quiet?" She smirked. "You're really taking this seriously, aren't you?" "I owe Jake a favor," Ethan said, though he knew that wasn't the whole truth. Lila studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. Dinner it is. But one rule. No suits. I want to see the real Ethan Walker, not the CEO version." Ethan chuckled. "Deal." As they parted ways, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just a favor to Jake. Lila Harper was a mystery he wanted to solve, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was stepping out of his own carefully constructed mask. Ethan adjusted his tie in the mirror, then immediately loosened it. Lila's words from their coffee meeting echoed in his mind. "No suits. I want to see the real Ethan Walker." He glanced at the casual button-down shirt and dark jeans he'd chosen instead. It felt strange, almost vulnerable, to step out of his usual polished CEO persona. But if Lila could face her past on her terms, the least he could do was meet her halfway. The restaurant he'd picked was a small Italian place tucked away in a quiet corner of Brooklyn. It was the kind of place where the tables were close together, the lighting was warm, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Ethan arrived early, as usual, and found himself nervously checking his phone. He wasn't sure why he felt so on edge. This wasn't a date. It was just practice. At exactly 7 p.m., Lila walked in. She was dressed simply in a black sweater and jeans, her hair falling loosely around her shoulders. No flashy designer outfits, no pretense. Just Lila. And yet she still managed to command the room in a way that made Ethan sit up a little straighter. "You're early," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Habit," Ethan admitted. "I like to be prepared." Lila smirked. "Well, let's see how prepared you are for this." She gestured to the menu. "I hope you're not one of those people who orders the same thing every time." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And if I am?" "You're missing out," Lila said, her tone teasing. "Life's too short to play it safe." Ethan couldn't help but smile. "All right then, you pick for both of us." As the evening went on, the conversation flowed more easily than Ethan had expected. They talked about everything: her work as an interior designer, his journey building Walker Innovations, the challenges of balancing ambition with personal life. Lila's sharp wit and dry humor kept him on his toes, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he could just be himself. But there were moments when the conversation turned heavier, when the shadows of their shared past crept in. "Do you ever think about high school?" Ethan asked cautiously, swirling the wine in his glass. Lila leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Not often, but when I do, it's usually not fond memories." Ethan nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. "I wasn't exactly the most aware person back then." "No," Lila said bluntly, though there was no malice in her tone. "You weren't, but you also weren't cruel. You just didn't see me." Ethan looked down at his plate. "I'm sorry for that." Lila studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "We were kids, and honestly, I'm not the same person I was back then. Neither are you." The words hung between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. It was a truth they both needed to acknowledge. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Lila met several more times. They went to a museum where Lila critiqued the architecture with a designer's eye while Ethan tried to keep up. They grabbed coffee at a bustling cafe, practicing how to navigate the inevitable questions they'd face at the ball. Each meeting chipped away at the walls they'd both built around themselves, revealing glimpses of the people they'd become. Meanwhile, Lila was working on something else: her mask. She had reached out to a local artisan, an older woman named Elena, who specialized in creating intricate, one-of-a-kind pieces. Elena's studio was a small, cluttered space filled with half-finished masks, sketches, and the faint smell of paint and metal polish. "This design is ambitious," Elena said, peering at Lila's sketch through her half-moon glasses. "You want it ready in 3 weeks?" "I know it's a tight deadline," Lila said, her voice firm but polite. "But it's important." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Important enough to rush perfection?" Lila hesitated, then nodded. The mask was more than just an accessory, it was armor, a way to reclaim her narrative, to face the people who had once made her feel small without giving them the power to define her. The design was intricate, with delicate silver filigree and tiny crystals that would catch the light. It would cover most of her face, leaving only her eyes visible. "Wear a mask?" Elena asked as she measured Lila's face. "What are you hiding from?" "I'm not hiding," Lila said quietly. "I'm choosing how I'm seen." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough, but remember, masks can become cages if you're not careful." The words stayed with Lila as she left the studio. She wasn't sure if Elena was right, but she knew one thing for certain: this mask wasn't about hiding, it was about control. On the night of their final practice dinner, Ethan noticed something different about Lila. She seemed lighter, more at ease. They were sitting in a quiet corner of a small bistro, sharing a plate of brioche, when he finally asked the question that had been on his mind. "Well, did you agree to this?" he said, his voice low. "You could have ignored my email, gone on with your life." Lila set down her fork, her expression thoughtful. "Do you know what I tell my clients when they're hesitant about redesigning their spaces?" Ethan shook his head. "I tell them that change doesn't erase the past, it just lets you see it differently." She met his gaze, her eyes steady. "I'm not doing this for you, Ethan, or for Jake. I'm doing it for me, to prove to myself that I'm not that scared girl anymore." Ethan nodded, his respect for her growing with every word. "Well," he said, raising his glass, "here's to change." Lila clinked her glass against his, a small smile playing on her lips. "To change." As they left the restaurant that night, Ethan couldn't help but feel that the ball wasn't just about facing the past, it was about rewriting it. The grand ballroom of the Westbridge Hotel was alive with music, laughter, and the soft clinking of champagne glasses. The Alumni ball was in full swing, and the room was packed with familiar faces. Some aged gracefully, others barely changed since high school. Ethan Walker stood near the entrance, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. He had arrived early as usual, but this time he wasn't alone. Lila Harper stood beside him, her silver mask catching the light with every movement. The intricate design framed her face perfectly, the crystals sparkling like tiny stars. Her black gown flowed elegantly to the floor, and though her face was mostly hidden, her presence was impossible to ignore. Heads turned as they entered the room together, whispers rippling through the crowd. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "Is that Ethan Walker's date?" another voice asked. Lila's grip on Ethan's arm tightened slightly, and he leaned in to whisper, "You okay?" She nodded, her voice steady. "Let them talk. I'm ready." As they made their way through the crowd, Ethan couldn't help but notice the curious stares and hushed conversations. He had expected this, of course. Lila's mask was a bold statement, and it was clear that people were dying to know who she was. But what surprised him was how calm she seemed. She moved with confidence, her head held high, as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. "A familiar Walker," a familiar voice called out. Ethan turned to see Amanda Collins, one of the most popular girls from their high school days, approaching with a wide smile. She was dressed in a shimmering gold gown, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves. "Amanda," Ethan said politely, though his tone was cool. "And who is this?" Amanda asked, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Lila. "This is Lila," Ethan said simply. Amanda's smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "Lila? Harper? Is that you?" Lila tilted her head slightly, her mask hiding any hint of emotion. "It's been a long time, Amanda." Amanda's laugh was light, but there was an edge to it. "Wow, I almost didn't recognize you. The mask is dramatic." "It's practical," Lila replied smoothly. "It keeps the focus on the conversation, not appearances." Ethan suppressed a smile. Lila's composure was flawless, and Amanda clearly didn't know how to respond. "Well," Amanda said after a moment, "it's good to see you. Enjoy the evening." As Amanda walked away, Ethan leaned closer to Lila. "That was impressive." Lila shrugged. "She's not as intimidating as she used to be." The evening continued, and Lila found herself navigating the event with surprising ease. She spoke with former classmates, some of whom were genuinely kind, while others seemed more interested in gossip. Ethan stayed by her side, offering quiet support when needed, but never overshadowing her. At one point they were approached by Ryan Carter, the former star quarterback, who had been one of the worst offenders in high school. He was still tall and broad-shouldered, but the years had softened his once cocky demeanor. "Layla," Ryan said, his voice tinged with surprise. "Wow, it's been a long time." "It has," Lila said, her tone neutral. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. "Listen, I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I was a stupid kid back then, and I know I hurt a lot of people. You didn't deserve that." Lila studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that." Ryan looked relieved, and after a brief exchange, he excused himself. Ethan watched the interaction carefully. "How do you feel?" he asked, once Ryan was out of earshot. "Lighter," Lila admitted. "It's strange, but hearing him say that, it helps." As the night wore on, the music shifted to a slower tempo and couples began to take to the dance floor. Ethan turned to Lila, holding out his hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Lila hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his. "Just don't step on my dress." They moved to the center of the dance floor, the soft glow of the chandeliers casting a warm light over them. Ethan placed a hand on her waist, guiding her gently as they swayed to the music. "You're doing great," he said quietly. Lila smiled behind her mask. "I didn't think I'd enjoy this as much as I am." Ethan chuckled. "You're full of surprises." For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. The noise of the crowd faded, and all that remained was the music and the steady rhythm of their movements. Then, as the song came to an end, Lila did something unexpected. She reached up and slowly removed her mask, revealing her face to the room. A hush fell over the crowd as people turned to look. Lila stood tall, her expression calm and unflinching. She met their gazes head-on, refusing to let the weight of their judgment affect. Ethan tightened his grip on her hand, offering silent support. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm more than okay," Lila said, her voice steady. "I'm free." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Lila's unmasking became the talk of the ball, but she didn't let it faze her. She laughed, danced, and even shared a few stories from her high school days, reclaiming the narrative that had once been taken from her. By the time the event ended, Lila and Ethan were among the last to leave. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Lila turned to Ethan with a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Ethan asked. "For being there," Lila said simply. "For letting me do this my way." Ethan smiled. "You didn't need me, Lila. You've had this strength all along." Lila looked up at the stars, her breath visible in the crisp air. "Maybe, but it's nice to have someone in your corner." Ethan nodded, his gaze soft. "Any time." As they walked away from the hotel, side by side, it was clear that the night had been more than just a reunion. It was a turning point, a chance to face the past, embrace the present, and look forward to the future. The next morning, Ethan sat in a quiet corner of the hotel cafe, nursing a cup of coffee. The alumni ball had been a whirlwind, and though he was exhausted, he couldn't stop replaying the events of the night in his mind. Lila's unmasking, her confidence, the way she had faced everyone without hesitation. It was nothing short of inspiring. As he stared out the window, his phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Jake Miller. "Meet me in the lobby. We need to talk." Ethan frowned but replied with a quick, "On my way." When he arrived in the lobby, Jake was already there, pacing nervously near the fireplace. He looked different from the confident, easygoing guy Ethan remembered from high school. There was a tension in his shoulders, a weight in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Jake," Ethan said, walking over, "what's going on?" Jake stopped pacing and gestured toward a pair of chairs in the corner. "Let's sit. This might take a while." Ethan followed him, curiosity growing with every step. Once they were seated, Jake leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "I saw Lila last night," Jake began, his voice low. "She looked incredible, strong, like she's finally left all that high school crap behind." "She has," Ethan said, "but it wasn't easy. She's worked hard to get where she is." Jake nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know, and that's why I need to tell you something I've been carrying for years." Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "I'm listening." Jake took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "Back in high school, I wasn't just part of the crowd that made Lila's life miserable. I was the one who started it." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it was me," Jake said, his voice cracking slightly. "The rumors, the pranks, the notes in her locker. It all started with me. I thought it was funny at the time, a way to get a laugh out of the guys. But it wasn't funny. It was cruel, and I didn't realize how much damage I'd done until years later." Ethan stared at him, his mind racing. He had always known Jake could be a bit of a troublemaker, but this was something else entirely. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ethan asked, his tone sharp. "Because I've been trying to make it right," Jake said, his voice filled with regret. "For years, I've been donating anonymously to the organizations Lila supports. Her design firm works with a lot of charities, homeless shelters, youth programs, stuff like that. I've been sending money, hoping it would help in some small way." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And does she know?" Jake shook his head. "No, and I don't want her to. This isn't about me getting credit. It's about doing something, anything, to make up for what I did." Ethan was silent for a moment, processing Jake's confession. Finally, he said, "You should tell her." Jake's head snapped up. "What?" "No. She doesn't need to hear this. It'll just bring up old wounds. She deserves to know the truth," Ethan said firmly. "You can't just throw money at the problem and hope it goes away. If you're really sorry, you need to face her and own up to what you did." Jake looked away, his jaw clenching. "You think she'll forgive me?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But that's not the point. This isn't about what you get out of it. It's about giving her the closure she deserves." Later that afternoon, Jake finally worked up the courage to approach Lila. She was sitting in the hotel garden, a book in her lap and a cup of tea on the table beside her. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow over her. "Layla," Jake said, his voice hesitant. She looked up, her expression neutral. "Jake? What can I do for you?" He sat down across from her, his hands clasped tightly together. "I need to tell you something about high school." Lila closed her book, her gaze steady. "I'm listening." Jake took a deep breath, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I was the one who started everything. The rumors, the pranks, the bullying. It was me. I thought it was just harmless fun, but it wasn't. It was cruel, and I'm so sorry." Lila didn't say anything for a long moment. She just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "Why now?" "Because I've been carrying this guilt for years," Jake admitted. "And after seeing you last night, seeing how strong you've become, I realized I couldn't keep hiding from it. You deserve to hear it from me." Lila leaned back in her chair, her eyes searching his face. "Do you want me to forgive you?" Jake hesitated. "I don't expect you to. I needed to say it, to own up to what I did." Lila was quiet for a moment, then said, "Jake, I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, but for me. Carrying that anger around, it was exhausting. But hearing you say this now, it means something. So thank you." Jake's shoulders sagged with relief, and for the first time in years he felt like he could breathe again. As Jake walked away, Lila turned back to her book, a small smile playing on her lips. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had faced it, conquered it, and come out stronger on the other side. The sun was setting over the city as Ethan and Lila walked side by side through the quiet streets near the hotel. The alumni ball was behind them, but the weight of the night still lingered in the air. It wasn't a heavy weight, though it was something lighter, something freeing. "I didn't think I'd feel this way," Lila said, breaking the silence. Ethan glanced at her. "What way?" "Relieved," she admitted. "For so long I thought going back, facing all of them, would just bring back the pain. But it didn't. It reminded me of how far I've come." Ethan smiled. "You were incredible last night. The way you handled everything, the way you carried yourself, it was inspiring." Lila laughed softly. "I had a good partner." They stopped at a small park, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the grass. Lila turned to face Ethan, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said, "when I first got your email, I almost deleted it. I thought, why would I ever want to go back to that part of my life? But now, I'm glad I didn't." Ethan nodded. "I'm glad you didn't too." For a moment, they stood there in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city fading into the background. "So," Ethan said, his tone light, "what's next for Lila Harper?" She smiled, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm ready for it." Ethan held out his hand. "Well, wherever you go, just know you've got someone in your corner." Lila took his hand, her grip firm. "Same goes for you, Ethan Walker." As they walked away from the park, the past finally felt like it was where it belonged behind them, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open, full of possibility. And that's the story of how Lila Harper faced her past and reclaimed her future. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how difficult our history may be, we have the strength to rewrite our own narrative. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more inspiring tales like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. This is Emma, and you're watching Emma's Stories, where every story has the power to inspire. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.